Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale. The headlines. NATO boosts Ukraine aid, pledges to help the country repair energy infrastructure. United States promises to reinforce NATO's presence from the Black to Baltic Seas. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation is difficult as Russian forces try to advance in the Donbass. Thanks for staying tuned. NATO allies have said they would help Ukraine repair energy infrastructure, which has been heavily damaged by Russian bombardments in what NATO's chief said was an attempt by President Vladimir Putin to, quote, weaponize winter. Russia has been carrying out heavy missile attacks on Ukraine's power grid and hitting infrastructure roughly every week since October in what Kiev and its allies say is a deliberate campaign to harm civilians, which is a war crime.
Dan Michaels, Wall Street Journal.
Russia is using brutal missile and drone attacks to leave Ukraine cold and dark this winter. President Putin is trying to weaponize winter, to force Ukrainians to freeze or flee. NATO allies are providing unprecedented support. And today, allies made additional pledges to NATO's comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine. This will fund urgent non-lethal support, including fuel and generators, helping Ukraine to address the consequences of Russia's strikes against their power grid.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has accused Russia of turning parts of the Black Sea into a, quote, war zone and pledged to reinforce NATO's presence there. Mr. Blinken was speaking at a meeting of foreign ministers in Bucharest, Romania, where he added that Russia was responsible for one of the worst food security crises in years.
When it comes to the Black Sea region, this is an area of vital strategic importance to us and to NATO. We have three allies that are literal states, as are close partners, Ukraine and Georgia. Russia has turned parts of the Black Sea into a war zone. We've seen missiles from warships coming into Ukrainian cities and towns. Russian forces, of course, have blocked Ukrainian ports, causing what has been the worst food security crisis in years. And thankfully, because of important efforts by the United Nations and Turkey, we were able to get the Black Sea corridor moving. And of course, Romania has been playing a critical role in the export of grain and other foodstuffs from Ukraine to help feed the world. So we're not going to be deterred going forward. We're going to be reinforcing NATO's presence from the Black to the Baltic Seas. We are committed, as we move forward, to building a modern, interoperable military, and that will have benefits across the entire NATO space, including when it comes to the Black Sea. As I've noted, Romania hosts the NATO Multinational Division Headquarters Southeast, which is NATO's regional command and control node. This is a critical institution. A NATO force integration unit, a fully operational multinational brigade. And we have, at present, well over 3,000 U.S. forces here in Romania. So in all of this, simply put, the Black Sea region is a critical component of NATO's defense, NATO strategy, but it is not static. It's one that we continue to work on, both directly together between us as well as in the context of NATO. It's something I intend on bringing up later today when we meet with all of the NATO foreign ministers.
And Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has asked Western partners to supply Ukraine with air defense systems and transformers so that it can better protect against Russian attacks on its energy infrastructure. NATO foreign ministers who are meeting in Romania pledged to step up support to Ukraine and help repair its energy infrastructure amidst a wave of Russian attacks that have repeatedly knocked out power supplies and heating for millions of Ukrainians.
Air defense, Iris, Hawks, Patriots, and we need transformers. When we have transformers and generators, we can restore our system, our energy grid, and provide people with decent living conditions, which President Putin is trying to deprive them of. When we have air defense systems, we will be able to protect this infrastructure from the next Russian missile strikes, and they are definitely to come. Unfortunately, this is the reality that we have to prepare for. So, in a nutshell, Patriots and transformers is what Ukraine needs the most.
And in another development, New Zealand and Finland have reaffirmed the need for continued international support to Ukraine for as long as it takes so that the conflict ends on terms set by Kiev, and reiterated their unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Finland's Prime Minister Sanna Marin also welcomed the UN Human Rights Council resolution that established a fact-finding mission to Iran to independently investigate the alleged human rights violations there, including those of women and girls.
War in Ukraine feels very concrete from Finland's perspective, because we share a long border with Russia, 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia. We have been in war with Russia, so the situation is very concrete to the Finnish people, and they need right now our support, and we have to make sure that they will win. So they need more weapons. We have made, for example, 10 packages of weaponry to Ukraine, and we also need to make sure that the sanctions are harder and harder against Russia, because the war is affecting all of us. Mostly Ukrainians, the civilians that are dying every day. They are bombing now the infrastructure in Ukraine, the electrical network, also the water network. So people are suffering every day in Ukraine. But it also affects all over the world. In Europe with energy prices, with high inflation. Also in New Zealand, also in this region with high energy prices. So we need to make sure that the war stops soon as possible, and Ukraine will win, and they will need our help. They will need hard power to win that war.
The focus of our conversation is what more we could do together in support of other women in other countries who are facing dire circumstances where we see the most basic of human rights being repressed and violated. And so I think that shows a sense of responsibility that we feel, given there are so few female leaders, to make sure that we use our voice on behalf of those that are experiencing such dire circumstances, and Iran is a good example of that.
I also worry about the situation in Iran right now, the human rights situation, the situation with women and girls, the brave women that are protesting against the laws and the security situation of women in Iran. We need to address these kind of issues together, and we will have this discussion in upcoming European Council in December.
Let's talk now to a member of the Ukrainian parliament, leader of the Golos party, talking about Kira Rudik. She joins us virtually from Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. Good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Let me start by asking something that is behind the headlines. We hear about attacks, we hear about damage to infrastructure and all of that, and attempts to repair them almost immediately. But what is the situation like where you are in Kiev? What is it looking like now in terms of how people are able to access heating and power, just to mention those two?
Of course, the situation right now is dire for Ukrainian people everywhere, including in Kiev. So you have electricity pretty much half of the time of the day. You have heating sporadically, and sometimes you don't have running water. Right now, I'm talking with you being on diesel generator that provides electricity for my laptop and for the lighting. And this is what many people in Kiev are doing, using generators to just go through their everyday life. We are also setting up specific shelters for people where they can come charge their phones, where they can sit in warmth, and they can make sure that they are not dying of cold. However, there is snow on the ground, and for elderly people and for people with small children, the situation becomes just extremely dangerous for their lives.
Given that scenario, let me bring you to the conflict itself. Many of those who have been observing, like we have, for the 9 months that it has been on, or thereabouts now, had said, look, if it went on for as long as it has now, winter would provide a kind of respite for both sides, particularly Ukraine, and maybe an opportunity for some kind of negotiation to take place. Only yesterday or thereabouts, Pope Francis said he was willing to provide the framework for mediation and all of that. And also just before that, the president of Belarus, who is well known as an ally of Vladimir Putin of Russia, also said that negotiations should and could take place, although in his case he said that they should be without conditions. Now, from those I have spoken to, one of the, shall we say, flies in the ointment is that Ukraine has a law now that says negotiations cannot take place unless certain things have happened first, which are the conditions that were being referred to. Is that, in your view, a deal breaker for any kind of talks about this conflict?
Of course, Ukraine has preconditions, and these preconditions are Russian army should not be on our territory, so we should not be having negotiations while Russian rockets are hitting Ukrainian cities and while our citizens are being tortured by Russian soldiers. This just does not make any sense and will be used by Russia as another point of pressure. The main point on negotiations is what or who will be making sure that Putin will keep his part of the deal. As of right now, we do not see any organization or any political leader of the world who can say, I will make sure that if negotiations happen, Russia will not attack you again. Everybody is just offering to be a mediator, but this is not what we need. We need to make sure that our children will not have to fight the same war that we are fighting right now. We need to make sure that we restore our sovereignty and continue as an independent state as we were before. And this is the key point in all the questions about the negotiations. Plus, if Russia wanted to sit at the table of negotiations, they would not be destroying our energy infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and heating infrastructure, because this is what the terrorists do. If they lose at the battlefield, then they try to attack peaceful citizens, and this is what Russia is doing right now. So we do not see any willingness from their side. Look at the grain deal, an important deal that allows us to continue to feed the world. At least twice, Russia pulled from this deal, saying they are not being a part and they cannot secure the ships that are going in and out. Then they returned. But how can you trust a partner that is doing something like this? This is absolutely dangerous, and especially dangerous to have any agreements with this partner on a peaceful level.
From everything you've said, and from some of those I've also spoken to, it does appear that the situation as it is now, from where we are today, while I'm talking to you, the only viable way out of this is a military victory from one side or the other. And of course, I mean, talking to you, that would mean Ukraine. But if we're to take a look ahead of it, and if that were to happen, I mean, let's pursue that a little bit. If that were to happen, what would post that mean if Ukraine were to win this in the coming days or weeks? You would still have Russia as a neighbor, and from what you said, the Ukrainians no longer trust the Russians. So how is this going to work? I mean, they're not going to go away.
This is an important point that you're raising. And as a leader of political party, we are having many discussions in Ukraine on how are we going to move forward. So there are two ways. The first way that we see of the future is that for Russian people to rebel and to destroy the leadership that started the war and change the political plans of Russia that they have right now. So for Russia to collapse as Soviet Union collapses. Second way is for Russia to remain the same that they are right now. That will mean that Ukraine will have to become a military state that will always have to fear the neighbor, that will have to have enough of the weapons for Russia to know that on every missile they will have the response from our side. This is not what I want for my country, but if we will have to defend ourselves, we will have to prepare for the long-term strategy here.
That's a very important point, because it brings me up to the other point, which is that what the conflict in your country has brought to the fore in terms of history is the idea that the world is basically divided into pro and anti-Western forces, if you like. This whole crisis, if you believe some of the narratives, was started by Ukraine wanting to move away from the influence of the East into more of the Western influence. And Ukraine is not alone. There are many other countries in that area that have the same ambitions, and maybe this has brought it to the fore. So in that bigger context, do you see other people learning, other countries in the region, learning the right lessons from this conflict going forward, and even Russia learning the right lessons, even if either or both of what you've just said happens?
The war that Russia started in Ukraine is not the first war that they started over the last 2 decades. They have started a war in Georgia, they have started a war in Moldova, and they have started a war in Ukraine. And this is why everybody learns the lesson that you should move as far away as possible politically, militarily, and in terms of alliance from the neighbors that wants to always destroy you, no matter what happens. And this is why I think the lessons that will be learned after we win this war would be that colonialism does not have place in the modern time, and we should fight it. I do not see it as a fight between East and West. I see it as a fight between the old way as colonies and empires, and Putin was very clear that he is restoring Russian empire, and a new way of sovereign states that are here to live their lives and to respect each other in the development that they have.
Indeed, all of us would be, all of us observing this would be expecting that this would end in possibly a situation where everyone comes away with it with something positive. But for now, Kira Rudik, thank you for your time and for your perspective, and best of luck, and please keep safe.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Still to come on the program, the crypto winter claims Bitfront Exchange as its latest casualty. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation at the front line remains difficult, with Russian forces attempting to advance in the Donbas region and in Kharkiv. In his usual nightly address, Mr. Zelensky said, quote, "The situation at the front is difficult. Despite extremely large losses, the occupiers are still trying to advance in the Donetsk region, get a foothold in Luhansk, move into Kharkiv, and they're planning something big in the south." Luhansk and Donetsk provinces comprise Ukraine's eastern Donbas region, where heavy fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces has been going on for months. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials said that Russian forces are shelling all settlements along the west bank of the Dnipro River in the southern Kherson region, including recently liberated territory. Sergei Kielan, a member of the Kherson Regional Council, told a news conference that the occupiers continue shelling both the city of Kherson and the west bank part of Kherson region. He said there had been no casualties, but Russian forces continue to strike at vital infrastructure. Mr. Kielan said that only a quarter of Kherson's city pre-war population of 320,000 remains, and more are leaving every day because of the shelling and lack of utilities. He states that additional carriages were being added to a daily evacuation train, and evacuation by bus routes also continue. Latvian Foreign Minister Edgars Rinkēvičs urged NATO to allow Ukraine to use its Western-supplied weaponry for strikes deep into Russian territory. The top diplomat made the remarks in a televised interview on the sidelines of the NATO foreign ministers' meeting in Bucharest. In particular, the weaponry should be used to attack sites used by Moscow to stage missile strikes against Ukraine's critical infrastructure, according to Mr. Rinkēvičs. He said, quote, "We should allow Ukrainians to use weapons to target missile sites or airfields from where those operations are being launched." While Moscow has repeatedly warned the West against pumping Ukraine with assorted weaponry, suggesting such behavior could ultimately result in a direct conflict between the US-led NATO alliance and Russia, Mr. Rinkēvičs brushed off such concerns, adding that the bloc should not fear escalation. The mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, has said the city, quote, "cannot allow Mr. Putin steal our Christmas," as Ukrainians prepare to tentatively celebrate the festive season with darkened trees, while Russian airstrikes knock out power and wreak havoc on critical infrastructure. The mayor says Christmas trees will be erected across the Ukrainian capital to mark Christmas and the New Year. Mr. Klitschko adds that mass events will remain prohibited under martial law, but no one was going to cancel the New Year or Christmas, and there should be an atmosphere denoting such. His call comes after weeks of sustained aerial attacks on Ukraine's energy grids, which have left families across the country without electricity, light, or water intermittently. And away from the war front, Bitfront, a crypto exchange backed by Japanese social media app Line, is shutting down after failing to overcome turmoil in the industry. The announcement by the US-based exchange comes at a time when the market for digital assets is grappling with financial contagion unleashed by the spectacular collapse of another exchange, FTX. According to a statement on its website, trading on Bitfront will be suspended by the end of the year, and withdrawals by March 31st, 2023. The company said it had been unable to overcome the challenges of rapidly evolving industries while distancing its decision from the implosion of FTX. Line opened Bitfront in 2020. It will now focus on its native blockchain ecosystem and tokens. Its decision to shut down the exchange came on the same day crypto lender Block filed for bankruptcy. Let's talk to Laddie Williams. Laddie, of course, will probably not be surprised at what I've just said. Morning, Laddie.
Morning.
So this Bitcoin turmoil continues, even as some people are putting their payments services integration on hold. In this case, Ukraine.
Exactly.
They're putting their Binance payment. Binance, I know, is another crypto exchange.
Yes, that's the top exchange, by volume, globally for exchanging cryptocurrencies and also turning cryptocurrencies into fiat. So they had plans to integrate, Binance's payment system into the government app, to allow, all in the bid to, promote digital payments. Right. And obviously, this is a country at war, so they need to digitize their processes as much as possible. But there were protests, from the Ukrainian crypto community, that Binance is still doing business with Russia. So why would they, integrate such a sensitive, integrate their app into such a sensitive, part of their country? So they said no. We would not allow this kind of thing to happen. Right. As long as they're doing, business with Russia, they are a friend of the enemy at this point. So they've had to, take back and put it on hold for now. That's the Ukrainian government. Right. Try and iron out some, issues about the integration before they can actually, move forward with it. So right now, that's on hold, due to the protests by Ukrainian crypto communities.
And staying along that theme, you've got digital trade. The UK and Ukraine are agreeing. So while one is stopping, one is going
Another
ahead.
one is, which is a more, friendly nation. That's the
United
UK.
Kingdom, of course,
exactly.
is very much in support.
Very much in support of Ukraine. So at the end of the day, it's also this is a country at war. Trade is not going to be easy, at this time. So they're trying to digitize every process of that, trade, with Ukraine and the UK now going into this, agreements, the groundbreaking agreements, the first of its kind, for Ukraine and the UK. And it's all in a bid to try and support Ukraine, at this time, because we've seen how the war has impacted their economy. They're not able to trade the way they should. So with this new the digitized corporation now, they'll be able to, make some digital payments. They're also going to incorporate like artificial intelligence, blockchain technology into the trade, process, all in a bit to, make it easier, for them to still make money, from their trade, still iron out, trade rules, even though, they're at war and, the economy is going through a lot right now.
Now, the Bank of Russia is open to relaxing curbs on non-residents. I mean, we know that in the aftermath of the start of the conflict, there have been tremendous restrictions on what non-residents can do in Russia. But it says it's willing to relax that if sanctions are eased. Yeah. And this is a quid pro quo situation, isn't
exactly. It? It's a tough one because remember when, the West, the US and its allies actually, hit those sanctions on Russia. We saw Russia actually do the same thing to non-residents of unfriendly
unfriendly countries. That word keeps reoccurring.
Yeah, it has to be unfriendly. So they didn't allow them to sell most of their securities that were owned by Russian companies that time. So it was part of their capital control process because obviously the sanctions were biting hard. It was also putting pressure on the ruble at that time. So they had to, put in all those capital controls to, keep the ruble strong, which actually, worked. But what they're saying now is, reduce your sanctions on us as a country. That's talking to the West now. Right. And you will also, in return, reduce
ease sanctions
and restrictions on, your nationals that want to do business, still with Russia. So not sure if the West is going to
buy that.
But it's a proposal. It's on the table now, so we'll be watching if they actually talk about it.
How are the markets doing? It's midweek.
Yeah, the markets are not looking so bad right now. I saw the U.S. futures this morning in the green. We see investors, the almighty Powell is going to speak today. So all investors are watching out for
that statement.
The statement, they want to know the direction for for rate hikes, going forward. And at the end of the day, they want to see, a less aggressive Fed. We don't know if that's going to happen.
Right.
Even though we saw that month-on-month deceleration, year-on-year deceleration with inflation in the U.S.
Right.
Some are saying inflation has peaked. Some are saying the U.S. dollar has peaked. So a lot to decide, right now for investors. Everyone is searching for direction. Either it's going to go up or go down. At the end of the day, that's also impacting, other markets globally. But we're seeing Europe, the European markets looking okay too, but cautiously, in the green, because they're also watching out for Eurozone inflation.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, so investors are watching a lot right now. We're also seeing the crypto market. Contagion is still weighing on that market, but we saw, Bitcoin top 17K for the first time in 2 weeks. So it's in the green. But some analysts are saying this might not last.
Might not yet.
Yeah.
Might not keep that.
So
I had that too.
Seeing a lot of, bear market rallies, everywhere. So still not easy times for investors, really.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. It's
Yeah.
still midweek. Maybe probably the week will still end positive
Probably,
one
yeah.
way or the other.
Probably.
All right. Thanks, Laddie. There'll be more, of course, from Laddie and his crew right after this program on Business Morning. Let's talk about Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, who addressed the British Parliament during her trip to the United Kingdom. The wife of Ukrainian president received a standing ovation as she entered a parliamentary committee room to deliver her speech. During the speech in proper, Mrs. Zelenska compared the war in Ukraine to Britain during the Blitz in World War II and said, like the UK then, Ukraine will not surrender, adding that, but victory is not the only thing we need. We also need justice. In another development and outside of Britain, China's stockpile of nuclear warheads has surpassed 400 in a fraction of the time previously estimated by the United States. That's according to a major Pentagon report, with Beijing focusing on accelerating its nuclear expansion as it seeks to challenge the United States as the world's top superpower. In the year 2020, the United States estimated that China had nuclear warheads numbering in the low 200s and expected the stockpile to double within a decade. But according to the 2022 China Military Power Report released just 2 years later, China has reached that mark and could have some 1,500 nuclear warheads by the year 2035 if they continue to expand their stockpile at the current pace. The world's most populous country is using its growing military, as one of its tools to create an international system that favors its worldview, posing the most consequential and systemic challenge to U.S. national security. That's according to the report. The report also adds that the larger nuclear capability is a far cry from what China used to call a, quote, lean and efficient nuclear deterrent. Beijing's investment in its nuclear triad, sea, land, and air-based nuclear launch options is a cause for concern in Washington. And the United States and Chinese militaries exchanged harsh words after a U.S. Navy warship performed the first freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea since the leaders of the two powers met earlier this month in an attempt to ease tensions. In the statement, the Chinese military claimed the USS Chancellorsville, a guided missile cruiser, illegally entered waters near China's Nansha Islands and reefs without the approval of the Chinese government. The move, according to China, shows the U.S. is a true producer of security risks in the South China Sea. A statement, however, from the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet later called the PLA's account false and a continued misrepresentation of U.S. actions in the South China Sea. According to the U.S. Navy spokesperson, the encounter is the first in the South China Sea since U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping met in person on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Indonesia 2 weeks ago. Let's talk now to retired Major General Pat Akem, who's joining us from our Abuja studios. Good morning to you, General. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Laddie.
Are you surprised or worried by what I've just said? The Chinese have built up their nuclear warhead capabilities. Some are saying that that is ahead of an attempt, or possible attempt, to move into Taiwan. The President Xi Jinping carried out a military reshuffle once he got his third term, and all the people on the military commission's high command are said to be people, he trusts and who believe in the one China policy, including Taiwan. So with this information about nuclear warheads and China's support for Russia in the Ukraine crisis, are you worried?
Well, we have said before that nuclear weapons were designed and meant to be strategic and to offer some kind of deterrence. There's something called the mutually assured destruction, that if you have nuclear weapons and I have nuclear weapons and we engage in nuclear warfare, then we are destroying each other. So I can't see the kind of strategic gain one would have from multiple nuclear weapons. For one, you do not need so many of them to be able to inflict the kind of damage that the world will not be able to recover from. So perhaps it's just to counter US and to say, yes, we're a big power, we have a huge club like you have, and we can also inflict damage. But beyond that, I can't see the kind of utility that one derives from just increasing the number of nuclear warheads. You only need a few of them to actually wipe out the whole world. So basically, yes, to show that yes, we too we have them, and we will have even more than you have. So I don't know where that is heading to, but where the Chinese are smart, so maybe there is something they know that we do not know. But basically, from a military perspective and point of view, I can't see the utility of having up to the number of thousands of warheads that we're talking about.
Let me bring you to the conflict itself now. Many, like you, had predicted that there will be a slowdown, a kind of loss of momentum as we get into winter. The winter is especially harsh in that part of the world, and so many of the conditions are not favorable to the movement of either personnel or equipment on either side. So many expected there to be a lull. But from the reports we're getting, the Russians are trying to advance in Donbass, perhaps trying to take advantage of that lull to catch the Ukrainians napping. The Ukrainians themselves are dealing with the attacks, the missile attacks on their energy infrastructure. So was it that we were wrong to expect this loss of momentum, because it doesn't look as if it is really happening that way?
Okay, those of us who have been observing this team from a military perspective will glean two overarching strategies from a Russian perspective. First, the rain of missiles on Ukraine, even extending to Kyiv. The knocking out of critical infrastructure, power, water sources, and all that. And then the use of the Iranian-made Shahid drones is calculated to bring the population into submission, to so inflict pain that the population will begin to appeal to the government, negotiate. Now, that is one strand of the strategy. The second strand of the strategy is to wear out completely the Western world supporting Ukraine. That look, to get them to the point where they can calculate Ukraine cannot win. So how long are we going to continue to support? And then that will invariably lead to a kind of negotiation that is favorable to Russia. So yes, you know, at a certain point in this war, Russia was holding 22% of Ukrainian territory. Today, that has reduced to 17%. About 40,000 square kilometers, so to speak. So if that is the position. Now, because Russia wants to hold something that they can use to negotiate if it gets to that point, that is why you have the Wagner group, the mercenaries fighting in Bakhmut, trying to take territory in Kharkiv. So yes, it has come to that stage. You will recall that a couple of months back, maybe 2 months back, Russia was upscaling its presence by the mobilization that was declared. They suffered so much. They weren't expecting this war to go on that long, and personnel, a lot of people have been killed, weapon equipment destroyed. So the intention was to build. it doesn't mean that they are entering into full-scale war trying to recover territories that Ukraine has captured back. But it's to keep activities going, to show that where we're in war, we're still moving. Basically to keep Ukraine on its toes. So that is the design. The design for now, from what I can glean from all that is going on, is to wear out the support that is coming from Western nations and NATO, and then to get the Ukrainian population to a point where it can say, look, we are suffering too much, and may perhaps push the government to negotiate. That is not going to happen. I can predict that. It's not going to happen because, first, if you look at the principles that are underpinning the starting of a war, the Jews at Belum, it's been fed by the Ukrainian population that the war is unjustified. And then the Jews in Belum, the conduct of war itself, the rules and laws that govern such conduct have been violently infringed upon. So the Ukrainian population is feeling we cannot give up at this stage. And perhaps you, from the government official you spoke with, said the same thing. They're not going to give up. They do not want to hear anything about negotiation. And as long as the support keeps coming from the West, they're prepared to fight. So for now, we're in a stalemate.
We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait, really. General Akem, quite a number of people have come to that same conclusion you've reached, that we're in a stalemate. Probably for how long the stalemate will remain remains to be seen. But for now, thank you so much for your perspective on the program. It's always a pleasure hearing from your vast experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Laddie.
And after the break, Ukrainian avant-garde art finds second life in Madrid, away from the bombs. Join us again. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. There's some breaking news out of China. We're hearing that the former Chinese leader, Jiang Zemin, has died at the age of 96. That's according to state media. Born in July of 1926, Mr. Jiang began his working life as deputy chief mechanic at the #1 car plant in Changchun in China's northeast, before being plucked from obscurity to the head of the Communist Party after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. Mr. Jiang gave up the job of Communist Party chief to Hu Jintao in November of 2002 and the presidency in March of 2003, and retired from his final post as chairman of the Central Military Commission in September of 2004, completing a historic leadership succession to a younger generation of leaders headed by Mr. Jintao, who then handed over to current leader Xi Jinping. And a month after Russia said it had ended a recruitment drive from its war in Ukraine, men who fled to neighboring Georgia to avoid the draft say they are in no rush to return home. Russia announced the call-up on September 21st after suffering setbacks on the battlefield. More than 110,000 Russians fled to Georgia. Statistics from the Georgian government show an influx that has fueled both an economic boom and resentment in a country where anti-Russian feelings are rife. Despite Russian President Vladimir Putin and his defense minister Sergei Shoigu announcing the end of the call-up a month ago, many say they are unlikely to return home anytime soon.
What we are saying is that today we have uncontrolled situation over not only movement of the citizens between Russia and Georgia, from Russia to Georgia, but also we do not really have a control over the migration process which is taking place in reality. And that's what needs to be changed. We need better regulated environment and framework for the security reasons, for the economic reasons, and for many, issues, also for the interest of the Russian citizens who come here, because greater is a perception in the society that the situation is out of control, more there is also threat for tensions within the society. I believe that when you have Putin governing the country, which has in its security and military doctrine basically authorization to use its military for.
And finally on the program, Ukrainian art has found a double refuge in Madrid, that's in Spain, where a retrospective on the country's avant-garde in the early 20th century shows works little known to the general public while offering them a safe haven away from bombs. The Spanish capital's Thyssen-Bonnesma Museum has inaugurated the exhibit In the Eye of the Storm, Modernism in Ukraine 1900 to 1930s, showcasing a collection of about 70 artworks in various formats representing different trends from figurative art to futurism and constructivism. But besides vindicating a little-known period in the history of Ukrainian art, the exhibition takes on particular relevance amidst Russia's ongoing invasion of the country. Denisova, who described the journey out of Ukraine as a roller coaster, said that transporting the works from Kiev to the European Union through a country at war was met with numerous challenges. They included the temporary closure of borders in response to the impact of a stray missile on Polish soil, which sparked fears of an escalation 2 weeks ago. Finally, out of danger in the museum's halls, Denisova hopes Ukrainian avant-garde art will tell the story of creation and resistance.
The day when we were bringing the artworks out of Ukraine was the 15th of November, which was the day of the biggest missile attack and it was all over Ukraine. So it was an extremely kind of a couple of days while the vans with the artworks were moving through Ukraine and then kind of getting through the customs and the border in Poland. It was super dramatic for everyone involved. And when they finally arrived here, we all sighed a breath of relief. And I think some of us even cried because we didn't expect that it will actually happen. So when we saw everything here, we were beyond delighted.
Thanks for staying with us. That's the program this morning. My name is Ladi Akiri, providing the updates throughout the day. But do watch out for specific stories on the world today. That's at 5 o'clock. But for now, you have yourselves a pleasant day ahead. Good morning.